Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Kieran Howes. I'm the Deputy Editor at HR Grapevine, and I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by Terry Attiff, who is the HR strategist, innovator, and highly experienced employee engagement practitioner who actually heads up product marketing at Access Group, where she's responsible for building the unique value solutions to HR challenges in the workplace. So we have an amazing webinar planned out for you today. Terry's going to deliver a massive amount of insight into the current unprecedented opportunity that businesses have to shape what will ultimately become the future of work. And we'll talk through some of the key imperatives that will help accelerate the redefinition of HR. So after Terry's presentation, there'll be ample time to answer all of your questions. So throughout, make sure you do get those questions in. And as I said, we'll answer as many as we possibly can at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Terry to tell you more.
Thank you, Kieran. Hello, everybody, and I'm so excited to connect with you all here today. And thanks so much to HR Grapevine for this opportunity. Today, my focus is going to be on employee experience and why employee experience matters now more than ever before. So we have 3 agenda items today. We will spend some time to understand 3 deeply connected dimensions of an organization: work, the workforce, and the workplace. We will also try to understand why it's important to find new ways to humanize employee experience. And what role should HR play in building the future of work? So before we move on and dive into each of these topics, I would request Kieran to pull up a poll where you can help me understand your biggest HR challenges in 2021.
Okay, so that poll is now live. If people can get their answers in, we'll leave it up for a few seconds for people to make their decision there. So the question we have today is, what do you see as the biggest HR challenge in your organisation in 2021? I'm sure that's a head scratcher after the turbulent year we've had. We'll leave it up for a few more seconds there. I can see most people have voted. Right, so if we call that there and share the results, we can see that 57% said managing a flexible and remote workforce, 22% said culture and diversity, 13% said employee health, safety and well-being, 4% said upskilling and reskilling of workforce, and a further 4% said adoption of modern HR technology and tools.
Right, great to see the results here. Thanks, Kieran. And I will now try and touch on all these topics today. Right. Okay, so you don't need to tell me to tell you kind of what an unprecedented, strange, weird, and difficult time it has been since March 2020. And one of the words that defined 2020 is pandemic, which literally means affecting everyone. Nearly every aspect of life today is dramatically different than it was 12 months ago. And it has led to some rather surprising discoveries and experiences, and many of which we are still getting used to. So let's take a look at a few. These masks that you see on the screen, they have now become as familiar as brushing our teeth. And for those who've already returned to their offices, sanitizers and cleaning wipes at each desk have become a common sight. There is an increased focus on better health, well-being, and lifestyle in general. With far more people working from home or unable to work, many have been inspired to explore nature in their neighborhoods, or many have taken up new hobbies such as baking banana breads or styling their home offices for the best looking backgrounds for Zoom meetings. We've also learned to keep a distance. The pandemic has changed our way of greeting. The hugs and the handshakes are out. The new thing is this elbow bump, and that has become a norm even in the business world. Online purchases have become both a necessity and a nod to convenience, and it has undoubtedly pushed people to become more tech savvy by embracing online and digital experiences. We also discovered what it means to be stuck at home with computer screens being our only way of contact, be it homeschooling, home office, working out, or staying in touch with our loved ones. Many people have experienced remote onboarding, and instead of walking into a new office, they started their job from their living rooms. We also learned the importance of social recognition, a moment to come together to clap each evening with our pots and pans for the key workers. It was a heartwarming lockdown tradition. COVID-19 might be considered as the unofficial closing ceremony for the industrial era and opening ceremony for the age of disruption, or as some call it, the fourth industrial revolution. It will fundamentally change the way we live, work, and connect with each other. And the speed and breadth and depth of this disruption is forcing HR to rethink how organizations create value and find new ways to build a flexible and inclusive, human-centered future. And perhaps we should think of it not as planning for the new normal, but for the next phase. Organizations today appear to have an unprecedented window of opportunity to shape what ultimately becomes the future of work. And the many forces of change have affected three deeply connected dimensions of an organization: work, the workforce, and the workplace. And today, I would like to offer my perspective on how organizations should begin to respond to these new challenges unfolding. It's not just deciding on working from home or changing physical workplaces to meet health and safety guidelines and checklists. The current pandemic shines a light on an organization's entire culture and its people experience. When it comes to improving employee experience, instead of thinking of a traditional employee life cycle, it's more important and valuable to think of moments that matter or moments of impact. From the moment someone looks at your job opening to the moment they leave your company, everything that the worker learns, does, sees, and feels contributes to the employee experience. And this blurring of our personal and work lives means that these moments also transcend our boundaries. It is now important to acknowledge that these moments that matter can include things like the first day in a new job, having a child, getting promoted, receiving great feedback at work, buying a house, or leaving the company, or anything in between. And by focusing on these moments, the organization is able to look at employees as whole individuals with unique experiences, as opposed to just employees who are there simply to do and complete a job. This is what allows organizations to bring a level of humanization to the workplace. And by tapping into this experience mindset, organizations can find new ways to humanize and to unlock the human dimension and uncover a sense of meaning and shared values that drive success. Now, it's also extremely important to know that there is a direct correlation between employee experience and delivering greater revenue returns. So firstly, what evidence is there that highly engaged workforces improve business performance? The most wide-scale piece of work was conducted by Gallup, and they compared organizations that had high engagement with those that did not. And Gallup found some stunning results. Outputs in the form of productivity, profitability, quality of goods or quality of work, shareholders' return, all increased significantly. And added to this, people-driven costs like absenteeism and time-consuming safety incidents all decrease in engaged organizations. And for those reasons, employee experience marketplace has exploded. And in fact, if you total up the tools spent on surveys, feedback, case management, knowledge management, and portals, it's well over 15 billion US dollars market today. And it leverages more than 200 billion in training, well-being, and other benefit spending. But in order to reap the benefits of this highly engaged group of individuals, we can't just mark our own homework, or we can't just use vanity metrics, and we can't just use check boxes and move on. Engagement is the alignment of company and individual objectives in an environment that both pull in the same direction, where both can thrive. And this should be measured from multiple sources independently and then brought together for the complete picture. And therefore, it's extremely important to make sure that we help the organization fit around the individual rather than vice versa. Now, let's look at some specific and tangible concepts that will enable HR build a humanized experience across the 3 dimensions. And I will reference back to the earlier poll that you contributed around the flexibility and making sure that you are engaging with a flexible and hybrid workforce coming back to work. So let's start with reboarding. And I start with reboarding here because it's the most immediate example in today's climate, as we have just seen in the poll response as well. Historically, it's been used in reference to maternity leave, secondments, or periods of prolonged sickness. But in a post-pandemic world, reboarding has come to bear a new and a more universal relevance. So let's take a look at the new definition. Reboarding is a concept of bringing people back after a prolonged absence or when working conditions have significantly changed. This is an opportunity to re-engage your staff and change how you work for the better. And it's fair to say that there is no going back to the workplace we knew before lockdown. Millions of people are going to be coming back to work, whether physically returning to their office or resuming their ordinary hours from home. Our people have changed in the last year. Their workplace has changed. The work they are coming back to has changed. And it is now time for organizations to manage people's transition from the temporary working conditions that the ones that we adopted a year ago to your vision for a newer workplace. Reboarding is an opportunity that we've never had before. We get to reboard all of our colleagues back into our business, back into our culture, and back to each other. And what does returning to work mean to your people, and how does it make them feel? Is it excitement, relief, a renewed sense of purpose? Or are they anxious, scared, fearful of the unknown? You must also consider your furloughed employees who may have been out of the loop. They will be adjusting to new working practices, policies, and technology in a workplace that looks significantly different. They might be feeling a bit rusty or anxious. We know that we are not going back to business as usual. But think of it that it's actually not a really bad thing. This is our chance to design a new kind of personalized return that connects all of these dots. Everyone's experience of returning to work will differ. Some will be heading back to the physical workplace, others returning from reduced hours or furlough, while others will be continuing to work from home with a new structure in place. It's important to be sensitive to the needs of each audience as you approach reboarding. So what are some of the tools that can help you connect all of these dots? So first up is we need to connect with employees' voice. You need to continue to check in with employees via formal surveys, quick pulses, or one-on-one conversations. We need to understand how they're finding the transition back to work and what else do they need. We must give regular feedback and increase our listening. And this needs to form part of the shifting environment, allowing everyone to access information and contribute in a way that they feel comfortable. And remember to act with empathy and compassion in all employee communications and interactions. This feedback needs to be recognized, and groupthink can't be allowed to happen where individuals only say what their bosses want to hear. Open, honest, and frank without fear of reprisals. And then the feedback needs to be acted upon in a transparent way, even if it is to explain why it won't be acted upon. Organizations must make a strategic shift from remote work as a reactive tactic and take the proactive strategy of hybrid or anywhere work. Around 60% of companies will pursue a hybrid model in which at least 10% of workers will work at least 2 days a week from anywhere. We should think of providing the right tools and technology to allow people to work in a way that works for them. By empowering employees with technology and devices that let them work in their best way and underpinning this with an inclusive culture, we can enable our people to stay productive and connected without compromising security and compliance. And this can then help boost employee well-being and productivity, empowering employees to deliver best customer experiences and innovations. Organizations will have to combine the right culture with tools and devices that enable secure, anywhere collaboration, connection, and productivity. And this will then make organizations more agile and resilient. Then it's about connecting with learning. Some employees, as you know, will have been away from work and out of the loop for months. So they will need patience and support while they readjust. Look at the training components of your onboarding process or your reboarding process and offer these as small bite-sized learning or micro learning to those returning employees as a refresher of key skills and systems. Now, this brings me to the next concept, that is learning in the flow of work. So before we delve into this, I would like to request Kieran to pull up a poll where you can help me understand how familiar you are with the term learning in the flow of work.
Okay, so the second poll is now live. So if people want to get their answers in, I'll leave it up for a few more seconds there. And the question that we're asking is, how familiar are you with the term learning in the flow of work? Okay, so the vast majority of people have answered now. I'm going to close this. We can see that 53% say never heard of it. 25% say I know very little about it but have heard about it. 18% say somewhat familiar, and just 4% say very familiar. Interesting. So
this is very interesting. So, and it's great to know where you are in terms of your understanding of this concept. So this phrase, learning in the flow of work, was coined by the renowned thought leader, Josh Bersin. And what it means is this phrase, learning in the flow of work, refers to easily accessible and engaging nuggets of learning during work, which will maximize productivity, reduce burnout, increase engagement, and improve knowledge retention. Now, let me bring this to life in an infographic here, which Josh Bersin calls the modern learner. And as you can see from this infographic here, the average human attention span is now just 8 seconds. Only 1% of a typical work week is all that employees have to focus on their training and development. According to this study, Josh Bersin found out that most learners won't watch videos that are longer than 4 minutes. So in order to hold employees' attention, information should be delivered in short, concise bursts. And it's important, like for instance, rebooting information is drip fed instead of bringing them in and locking them in a room for a whole day of rebooting trainings. So it's important to do it in short, concise bursts. Mobile learning is also really essential now. As some of you may have heard, that millennials check their phones 9 times every hour. Wow. No wonder they're increasingly turning to their smartphones to find just-in-time answers to unexpected problems. Another concept with learning in the flow is point-of-need learning, which means meeting learners where they are. So 70% of employees access answers to on-the-job questions through search engines. That's because Google is often the most readily available tool at the point of need. Imagine if they got used to accessing your brand's own instructional content that easily. And that's the power of on-demand learning and offering learning in the flow. And also, it's important to make learning gamified and fun and engaging. And by connecting employees to play off against each other, we can ensure that knowledge is not just landing, but sticking. These modern learning technologies, learning platforms, and quality digital learning content are making it easier to meet these evolving needs and facilitate learning in the flow of work. Now, this leads me to another very important concept, and that is that the future of work is going to be much more about the heart. HR and business leaders now need to draw upon their emotional intelligence and compassion and empathy to manage employees' well-being at work. Taking time to ensure that your employees are able to voice their concerns and be heard is essential to sustaining a culture of collaboration, equality, and inclusion. And when differences of perspectives are accepted and thoughtfully addressed in the workplace, employees will feel a sense of belonging, and they will know that the organizations want to understand and support them. People often say to me that, don't I go to work to get paid? That's really why I go there. And yes, that is the case. They get heightened sense of importance, sense of self-worth, but it doesn't change their behavior. If you give someone 25% pay rise, would you expect them to deliver 25% more? I don't think so. I believe it was Simon Sinek who said that when people are financially invested, they want a return. But when they are emotionally invested, they want to contribute. And that's where we really need to get to. We need contribution. So it is really clear that focus on people and reimagining how we want to work in the future is the next frontier. Organizations are sitting on this gold mine of suppressed employee engagement, and designing a humanizing digital employee experience can help unlock it. Now, let's explore how HR professionals need to go beyond their functional and operational excellence and find new ways to add value to their organizations. So before we delve into this, I would once again request Kieran to pull up a poll to reflect on how confident are you with the HR strategy to improve employee experience in your organization over the next 6 to 12 months?
Fantastic. So that poll is now live as well. The question is, how confident are you with the HR strategy to improve employee experience in your organisation over the next 6 to 12 months? This is the big question, I think, here. Be very, very interesting to hear what people have to say. We'll leave it up for a tiny bit longer so everyone can get their answers in. Okay, perfect. So I think the vast majority of people have answered now. We see the results. Now this is interesting. 53% said somewhat confident. 27% said very confident. And then equally 10% said extremely confident and 10% said not confident at all. Now that really is fascinating.
Yeah, this is really insightful, and it's really important to see this kind of, from an employee perspective, but the big focus and sort of responsibility is on HR to drive this employee experience in the organization. So in order to drive employee experience as part of your HR strategy over the next 6 to 12 months, HR professionals will need to ensure that they have the mindset of a business maker and not just of a HR business partner. An employee-centric approach should be at the heart of all HR strategies, defining not just what HR does, but how HR does it. And therefore, HR must reinvent its role and ask these questions. As an agile leader, how can HR build organizational resilience and prepare for tomorrow? As cultural champion, HR must look to inspire desired behaviors and beliefs. And as a growth enabler, HR must adopt smarter ways of working where teams thrive and talent wins. Now let's look at each in more detail. With profound disruption and challenges, HR and people leaders have had to adapt and pivot repeatedly. I'm sure you agree with me on that. And HR must now prepare for this hybrid workplace that I have mentioned before. It's because work is no longer a place. It's all about what you do, not necessarily where you do it from. And for many, this hybrid vision is a model that combines remote work and office time. It generally grants more autonomy to employees to fit work around the rest of their lives, rather than structuring other parts of a weekday around hours logged in an office. Ideally, it's the best of both worlds: structure and sociability on one hand, and independence and flexibility on the other. HR must focus their automation efforts on helping hybrid and flexible employees to be more productive. When everything in HR is digital, it becomes easier to analyze workforce data and show how HR can directly impact strategic business goals. Now let's look at the HR's role as a cultural champion. 2020 was the catalyst that put well-being on the business agenda. Now, in 2021, when deciding what changes to make to your organization, remember that wellness is not just the physical health of your employees. Employee well-being, now more important than ever, is more holistic, and it must include mental, physical, emotional, and financial well-being. It's also time to start thinking differently about differences. Real workforce diversity is not a metric, it's a mindset. And that's because when diverse teams are infused with diversity of thought, it comes from a collection of individuals who bring different life experiences to the table. Gender, sexual orientation, ethnic cultural background, age, all of these characteristics make up of who we are as human beings, and they influence how we engage with others, how we work, how we come together to solve these problems. And having more of that is better for all of us. The thing that employee experience most connect to is culture. And that is something that is the least tangible in a quantitative, data-driven world. You can, however, let culture develop and steer it towards a common culture and measure how people respond. And technology can help you by providing a place to bring the outside in, to share your true self with your colleagues, whether remote or in the office. And I understand that this has become increasingly difficult with remote workers. We have lost that water cooler moments where we used to talk about those random interactions where people would connect without an agenda and could stumble upon a joint initiative that helps transform your company for the better. I bet today your employees have wall-to-wall Zoom or Teams meetings that are solely focused on tasks. How often do they get to chew the fat? I know I'm guilty of not connecting with some people since lockdown, simply because we weren't on the same set of task-oriented meetings. We need to bring this social harmony back, and in a way that works for in-office, remote, and hybrid employees. And technology can help you by providing something as simple as an updated social intranet, or what I call a digital headquarter, that contains company updates with room for comments and expression for thought. These could be linked to updates or completely spur of the moment banter. By moving outside of this usual task-based approach, we get diversity of thought and expression. And it also brings an element of fun, which goes a long way to bringing people together and uniting them under one common company culture. Now, the role of HR as a growth enabler is to connect people with the knowledge that they need. The current challenge employees have when learning in the traditional sense is that they're just too busy, as I showed you in the infographic earlier, and they don't have enough time to learn. Learning in the flow of work or in the moment of need learning that I touched on earlier works best when the information is A, easily accessible, and B, available with context. HR must also build sustainable employee upskilling and reskilling programs that prepare them to be future ready and in turn drive business growth. There's no doubt about it that 2021 will be a defining year of digital employee experiences. and the seamless digital experiences to which we have become accustomed to in our personal lives have created an expectation for better experience in our work lives as well. And role of HR here is to design these digital employee experiences that are intuitive, engaging, and delightful, and they help employees do their best work. So there you have it. Hopefully, today's session has given you a flavor of how you can amplify employee experience and provide your employees with meaningful moments at work. So now let me leave you with a few takeaways. First thing we need to remember is that in order to humanize employee experience, we need to look at employees as whole individuals with unique needs. We need to understand how people think, how they feel, what are their motivations, aspirations, and expectations. We also need to provide them with the right knowledge, skills, and right technology tools in their hands to enable them to do a good job. We also need to reinvent the role of HR as an agile leader, a cultural champion of diversity and well-being, and a growth enabler to prepare employees to be future ready. And you need to support these outcomes. You need to provide employees with a digital toolbox to collaborate, to communicate, and connect with each other, and make use of data and technology to ensure a personalized experience for every individual. And armed with this understanding, you can begin designing employee-centric experiences and offer physical, human, and digital choices that will empower employees to achieve new productivity goals and in turn drive business growth. So there we have it. That's employee experience and why it matters now more than ever before. It's really important that you continue this conversation. I've left my contact details here for you, so feel free to connect with me outside of this session as well. With that, we move on to some questions. Kieran, I will hand over to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Terry. That was really, really enlightening, and I'm sure that all of our audience would agree. There's loads and loads of take home there. As Terry said, we have some time now to cover some questions. There is still time to get some questions in, so pop them in the chat function on the screen, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. But let's start first with a very big question, and I think it's one that a lot of people will want to know the answer to. That is, businesses usually see employee experience as a nice to have, though we have seen a slight shift since COVID-19. There's still a long way to go. So how should HR move experience up the C-suite agenda? What do you think about that, Terry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really, really important question. And let me take a step back. First of all, it doesn't cost a lot of money to treat people well. So that's something I need to get to you all, that a lot of time people think that investing in employee experience means a huge financial investment. That's not the case, because it doesn't take a lot of money to treat people well. And it is something that organizations are doing in one way or the other. So if you choose to ignore culture and the voice of your people, these things will still happen and you won't be able to control them. And as I showed in the presentation earlier as well, that there is a lot of research available that shows the connection between employee experience and business outcomes. The executives, the C-level suite of your organization will want to see a direct link to business performance KPIs, such as increased productivity, lower staff turnover, company reputation, and excellent employee experience delivers on all of these aspects. And capturing these results in easy to understand dashboards and reports gets your most important stakeholders on your side, and it helps HR build that credibility at the C-level.
Well, the next question I think is a perfect second parter to that, and it's something you've talked about a little bit there, but maybe you could delve in a little bit more on how to measure the ROI of investing in that employee experience.
Absolutely. I think we can't dismiss the fact that if you want to build that credibility with your C-level suite, you absolutely need to talk in their language. And there is significant ROI in terms of dollars and pounds from investing in your people and employee experience. It is a strong predictor of financial results. So if you look at companies on Fortune 500, if you look at FTSE 500, Fortune 100 best places to work, or Glassdoor's top 50 places to work, you will notice that the companies that provide the best employee experience have more than 4 times the average profit per employee. They have 3 times higher revenue per employee, and they have a rate of staff turnover that is 40% lower than the average organization. Also, if you look at it in terms of stock price, the best organization for employee experience tend to significantly outperform at all the major stock indices. So that shows how significant it is to invest in employee experience, because it ultimately delivers that ROI that your senior leadership is looking to see.
Yeah, that's a very poignant point. The next one I think is something that a lot of people will have been wondering about after the year that we've had, and that is, who are the major stakeholders when it comes to ensuring employee experience in an organisation, and is it the sole responsibility of HR to ensure EX?
Interesting you asked me that question, Kieran, because I was thinking of putting it as a poll question to the audience as well, because I think there are some misconceptions about it around who is responsible and who is the main stakeholder of employee experience. Well, in my view, it has to start at the top, at the CEO level and at your C-suite level, because these are the people who must be the evangelists for all things employee experience, and they need to be the biggest sponsors for this sort of stuff. And then, of course, there is the HR team. And for me, in my view, HR team are basically the employee experience task force. HR would develop the strategy, the tactics, and the plan, and help make it all become a reality. The next layer are all the leaders, your line managers inside of an organization. It is their job to make these employee experience strategies that HR have put together and bring them to life by implementing them with their teams. And the final layer out of that is everyone in your organization is a stakeholder. All employees are stakeholders, because it is up to everyone to make sure that they speak up, to share their ideas and what they care about and what they value.
Of course. Well, the next question is something which I think all of us at HR Grapevine have actually done some research into in the past. It's a very, very good question, which is, how does employee experience relate to employer brand?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of time people treat these concepts of employer brand, not connecting it with employee experience. But in my view, employer branding is absolutely a part of that. It is essentially how the organization is perceived both publicly and privately amongst employees and amongst just the world in general. And I'm sure most of the audience have also experienced and gone on to Glassdoor to see company reviews. From candidate perspective, nowadays, most candidates use Glassdoor to inform and qualify themselves before the interview process even begins. And when your employer brand aligns with your employee experience ethos, everyone wins. And as an organization, you minimize the risks of when a new employee will join, that they will be dissatisfied or disappointed and leave the organization too soon. And employees that accept role within your organization will be satisfied that they received what they signed up for. And when you create an employer brand that is disconnected from the actual more authentic employee experience, you set employees up to be dissatisfied with the reality of the job or disconnected from the company's vision and value. And this could then result in higher levels of voluntary turnover, lower levels of employee engagement, both of which then affect long-term productivity and profitability within your organization.
Mm-hmm. And Terry, your presentation talked so much about what HR should be aspiring to at the moment. Obviously, that's what we all want to know. But another side of that, of course, a caveat to that is this question, which I think is very interesting, which are, what are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see organizations making when executing their employee experience strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. First and foremost is when HR and organization leaders in general don't really understand what employee experience is. So getting your understanding and clarity around employee experience is absolutely important, because if you don't know what employee experience is, you won't be able to execute on it. And remember, it's about those three dimensions that I talked about: work, workplace, and workforce. You have to consider all these three dimensions when you are crafting your employee experience strategy. A lot of time there's a misconception that employee experience is all about kind of giving free food or having bean bags in the office cafeteria. That's not a strategy. Changes need to be made to the engine of the organization, not just repainting it. I would say another pitfall that I mentioned earlier was that employee experience is not seen as a KPI of HR team. It is an organizational thing, and everyone needs to be involved here, and not just the HR team responsibility. And the third thing I would say around the pitfalls would be to not see it as a one-off project. It's really important to understand that this is a never-ending and continuously evolving process. We will be in a rapidly changing world, which means that our workplaces and practices will change, and we would have to pivot accordingly. And just take a look at what COVID has done, right? All of a sudden, employees at organizations around the world were being told to work from home, when many of these organizations never even had flexible work programs. So I hope that answers your question, Kieran.
Yes, yeah, definitely, yes. And on the subject of COVID there, someone's asked a brilliant question, which I think really aligns with that, actually. And that is that some organizations at the moment, maybe that are small to medium in size, are struggling with their resources, the limited resources. So which areas and initiatives do you suggest, Terry, bring the highest impact to the business?
I think it's a very good question, because the thing with when you're looking at your resources is that if you expand outside of your HR team, so for a small medium organization, will you probably have under 10 people HR team, probably maybe 3 to 5 people team. You can't be expected to deliver on everything because you've got so much on. You don't have the time to focus on employee experience as well as dealing with all the operational day-to-day tasks. So one thing which I have suggested to SMB businesses is to create a task force, create a team of change agents. So it could be people who are either positively respected in the organization. So don't think of it always in the view of it has to be someone with a big job title. It could be anyone who is a good influencer, people who are more energetic, people who have a way around people, and they, you know, when they talk, people listen. You need to bring them on board and make them part of your task force, so that you don't need to go and hire external consultants to deliver this. You don't need to invest massively into you know, some sort of a HR budget. You can do it all on your own. And the other great thing about doing it that way is that these change agents, when they become part of your task force, they become your biggest sponsors and evangelists. So they do your job for you. So it really helps in kind of expanding that.
Well, that's a great point. Yeah, very, very good. Hopefully that's an ideal take home for everyone who's watching. Another really interesting question here. We've seen a massive rise in the amount of surveillance technology that has come into place, you know, employee monitoring technology since the start of the pandemic. And this person's asked, basically, does implementing those kind of tools, does it impact, or does it have a big impact on people's emotional investment in their work?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and something where I may have a bit of a disputed opinion on. Well, for me, I personally think that the organizations should be built around trust and transparency. If you have people who want to come and work for you, you don't need to watch them like a big brother. And I think with these surveillance technologies, they pose that kind of an impression of a big brother watching me. And personally, I am not a big advocate of that. I think if you have to build trust and transparency with your employees, and you give them, that you empower them and you give them the right autonomy and work-life balance, you don't need to put these cameras and surveillance technology on top of that. But yes, if in a case where you have to do it and it has been driven from top down, and you can't challenge it, then in that case, my recommendation would be that you make it transparent and open with your employees. Take them along that journey. Don't bring it as with a stick. You know, it is important that you build rapport with employees, build trust, transparency with them, and take them on the journey, take their feedback along that. So one of the things which I could suggest is maybe test it with a really small team in your organization. Don't roll it out as a company-wide surveillance program. Try and test it with a very small group of people, get their feedback, listen to it, understand why they are challenging it or why they are suggesting some inputs, and then implement it you know, wider. But personally, like I said, I'm not an advocate of surveillance in this view, because I feel that employees should be given empowerment and trust and confidence when they come to work.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Well, I think we've got time for a couple more. This is a big question, which is what is the future of employee experience? Where do you see employee experience 5 years down the line? Now, I know obviously after the year we've had, that's quite hard to predict.
Absolutely. I think it's really hard to predict even what's going to happen next month with all these, you know, our lockdown timelines. But well, for me, I would say I'll break it down, right? So because we can't really predict the future anymore in the way we used to do it in the past. So in the short term, I would say the initial future is first to get companies to embrace the concept of employee experience, to really understand it, and give your employees access to meaningful tools and technology that is really simple to use in their daily lives. Because you can't dismiss the reality of technology and the role that it plays in driving employee experience, because technology sort of does half of your job, because employees have their mobile phones all the time, and it's really easy to engage with them, to connect with them, and meet them wherever they are, and that's really the key. The second area I would say, again, in the short term view, would be around people analytics and data, and understanding what our employees care about and what they value, and actually being able to put some numbers behind it. But then don't just leave it at capturing those numbers. Do something with it. Come up with some actionable insight, and come up with some form of a framework around how you're going to implement changes based on the data. And I also expect more cultural investments in things like leadership, health and well-being, learning and development programs, and diversity and inclusion has become a very hot topic. It's no longer a lip service. It has become, it's really embedded into the DNA of the organizations going forward. So all of these are really important. Now, to answer to your question around what does it mean in the next 5 years, I expect to see great progress made in this area. My hope is that most organizations will have teams in place to address this, and this term employee experience will become pretty much mainstream, and that organizations will be constantly revisiting their workplace practices. And we all deserve to be part of an organization where we want and not need to show up to work each day. And in 5 years, I would really like to see more people fit into that vision.
Well, I've thrown you many hard questions over the course of this Q&A. So I'll end with a really nice, simple one, hopefully. This person starts out by thanking you for a really interesting presentation and asks if the audience can receive copies of the slide deck from today. Is that possible at all?
Yes, absolutely. I will share it with the Grapevine team, and they can distribute it to you. And happy to connect with you all as well. I'm available on LinkedIn and Twitter, and my LinkedIn handle is there. So please feel free to connect with me, and we can bounce off ideas on your experience of implementing this strategy. So really appreciate your time, and thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'm sure that I can speak for everyone in our audience for saying thank you so much for taking the time, Terry. It's been absolutely fascinating. And yeah, as Terry says, her details are below. So if anyone would like to get in contact with her, they're welcome to do that. And yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of the day. Thanks very much.
Thank you.